Hi, welcome. I am joined today by my wonderful client and E-CET coach in training, Holly. And she's joining me today because we're going to have a conversation about disproportionate reactions. And my idea for this topic was sort of triggered by the Will Smith, Chris Rock debacle that happened earlier this week, because I remember watching the video for that and thinking to myself, holy disproportionate reaction, Will. And Holly is going through my coaching process right now, my coaching course to become a coach herself. And just only recently, we were talking about disproportionate reactions in one of the group calls. So I thought it would be a great conversation to have, a great topic to cover, but also a great conversation to have to bring one of my coaches on, since we were just talking about this. And yeah, so that's where we're at. That's what we're talking about. Welcome, Holly. I'm super happy that you joined me today.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, so we were just talking about disproportionate reactions a few weeks ago, right? And yeah, so just to sort of explain what they are, disproportionate reactions is basically when something happens to you or around you or in life or whatever, or you think something or just whatever, and the reaction that you have to the situation is disproportionate to the actual situation. For example, in the Will Smith scenario, when, Chris Rock makes a joke, albeit a bad taste joke, it wasn't the most sensitive joke to have made. It wasn't, necessarily nice. It was probably rather hurtful given, Jada Pinkett Smith's health condition. It was probably a rather hurtful joke, but nonetheless, it was meant to be a joke. And an appropriate reaction to somebody making a joke would be something a lot more along the lines of, if you didn't like the joke, just ignoring it or scowling or, just whatever. But the disproportionate reaction is to walk up on stage on live TV and assault somebody. A little bit of a disproportionate reaction, would you say, Holly?
Just a little bit.
Yeah. And so I wanted to talk about this because we can all relate to this. We can all relate to this idea of having something happen, or even just thinking a thought or something, and then reacting, not responding, but reacting in a way that is completely disproportionate to the actual thing that happened, right? So Holly, can you think of any examples in your world where this may have happened? Do you remember the example maybe that you had given when we were talking about it on the call a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I do. I think we've probably discussed it a couple of times. It's come up because looking back on these things, you look back at them with humor. You have to. So it was one of the days where I was really frustrated about my choices in the food that I was eating that day. I was being really critical, and my poor daughter did something completely nondescript, like she was humming too loudly or put her shoes on. And I shouted, which was completely disproportionate in itself. But then what I continued to do was beat myself up about it. So yeah, I'd shouted at my daughter. So I was the bad mum. I was a bad person. I was a bad human. I was just bad. And I headed straight to the fridge and I ate tons of chocolate. I then picked my daughter up. We went to the shop. I got some more chocolate. So I then felt like a bad mum again because I picked my child up at, maybe 5 o'clock in the evening. We've gone to the shop to get more food for me. I then gave her some chocolate. I felt bad about giving her some chocolate. I ate more chocolate. So by the end of it, I'd eaten, a ton of chocolate. I felt sick to my stomach, all because, one, I was anxious and worried, but two, my daughter, bless her, had just not put her shoes on.
And I love that example that you used because it's a perfect example of one of the reasons why we eat.
Yeah.
Right. Disproportionate reactions to something that happened. or something that we're saying to ourselves, right? It started because you were maybe judging yourself for something that you ate. So that in itself, just judging ourselves for eating a thing, is a disproportionate reaction. We don't need to judge ourselves for eating anything.
Yeah.
And then it gets compounded because you're judging yourself. It gets compounded into eating more of the thing and judging yourself even more. And then because you're stressed and you're judgy and feeling all of this, anxious emotion kind of crap, you end up, yelling at your kid, and then compounds with the thoughts. Yeah, it's such a great example of disproportionate reactions contributing to why we eat and eating in ways that don't serve us. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. Totally irrational. And it was that scenario, especially, I thought was funny because, well, not funny, but looking back on it now, even a small thing like my daughter not putting her shoes on and then shouting, that in itself is completely disproportionate. And I think there is what you've got to consider is what's happened before, why you've reacted like that.
Yes.
I see a lot of people now react disproportionately when they're trying to do something on their phone and someone distracts them, and they'll be like, wait a minute, and the person was asking them, did they want a cup of tea or something?
Yeah, very British. That's such a great point too. Why are we having the disproportionate reaction?
Yeah.
Because you know me, it's always about figuring out the why behind our behaviors, right? So yes, what caused it? Why are we having that disproportionate reaction? So important to figure out.
100%.
It's usually because there's something underneath what just happened that triggered something deeper in us.
Yeah.
Right. And so I always talk about, to give you another client example, again, around food. This one particular client, I remember she came home from work and noticed that the dishes weren't done. And she knew that her kids had been home all day while she was at work, and they could have done the dishes, but they didn't do the dishes. And immediately she was angry because the dishes weren't done. And she went straight to the kitchen and ate half a box of cookies. Disproportionate reaction to dishes not being done, right? Yeah. And so we were talking about that on the call too, and where that may come from. Can you relate to that kind of thing too, where somebody does something or doesn't do something and you end up having a disproportionate reaction in that way?
Absolutely. I think most people could choose a work-based scenario where somebody's not done something that you expected them to do, or it's along the same lines. I can think of an example. I was at work and I was asked to write a letter to go on a course. I wrote the letter, happy to do so, and it came back to me with red pen. Now, that was it. Immediately, I picked the letter up, I threw it on the desk, and I walked out of the room. Now, that was, really disproportionate in the fact that I didn't even look to see what the amendments were. I didn't really wait for the response. It was just the fact that straight away it told me that I was inadequate. If I couldn't write a letter, I wasn't good enough to go on this course, and so on and so forth. The negative spiel, the story that we tell ourselves, just because somebody gave me a minor correction on a letter, probably trying to help me.
Right. But it triggered that deeper belief in you, right? And that's the whole point of these disproportionate reactions when we have them. They're disproportionate reactions because they're triggering something deeper in us. And because it triggers that deeper belief in us, in your case, I'm maybe not good enough because they criticize something that I did, right? There's red pen on it, so I must have not done something right. And so it triggers that deeper kind of fear of not being good enough, or fear of doing something wrong, or whatever the case may be. And that's so common. So common. And the sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and even the example of a colleague not doing something that you expected them to do,
Yeah.
you don't always wait for the reason. There might be a perfectly valid reason as to why that task hasn't been complete, but immediately you go to, they've done it because they don't like me, because
Yeah.
they're deliberately going out of their way to ruin my day. And 9 times out of 10, it isn't that. It's
Yeah.
something deeper, a personal, a personal issue that you have
Yeah.
with yourself, I
100%.
suppose.
And that's a great example, because that was the case with the client I was talking about when she came home and she found the dishes weren't done. We dug into that particular scenario because, as you know, I'm always about like, what was the struggle that you had with the food this week? And then what, and we dig into like what precipitated it. Right. And so with that particular client that day, she said she didn't, until we started digging into it, she had no idea. But once we started digging into it, we started recognizing, oh, the story she was telling herself about the fact that the dishes weren't done was that nobody cares.
Yeah.
They knew that she was going to come home tired, and they sat around all day not doing anything. And if they really cared about her, if they really loved her, if she really mattered to them, they would have done the dishes to help her out so that it would have been easier for her when she came home from work.
Yeah.
And so the disproportionate reaction there is coming because it triggered that fear in her, right, of not being loved or accepted or valued. So it triggered that deeper fear that most of us have on some level.
Absolutely.
Most of us have that on some level. So it triggered that deeper fear, which drove her to eat. It triggered that fear in that story, which drove her to the cookies. When the reality was that it had absolutely nothing to do with that. Of course, her family loves her and values her. They're just kids, and they're selfish because they're kids. That's what kids don't see dishes because they don't care about dishes. It had nothing to do with how much they love her, and so it's a completely disproportionate reaction because it triggered that inner fear, and she ends up eating a half a bag of cookies or something because of it, because it triggered that deeper fear. Like you with the chocolate, when you yelled at your daughter. You yell at your daughter, it triggers that, well, I'm a bad mom.
Yeah. And I think when I was telling you that story, we dug into it even further, in that all I'd said to you was I was super stressed with my daughter and I ended up eating loads of chocolate. But realistically, I was stressed with my daughter because I was already stressed and already anxious because I was trying to follow, a food plan that I didn't want to follow, and I'd fallen off plan, and I was already stressed and already annoyed about all these food worries, and then you just add one tiny little thing into the equation, and that's just the tipping point.
Yep.
And possibly, like with Will Smith, this was just a tipping point for him. Who knows? But for sure, there are disproportionate reactions of different scale, granted, but
absolutely, yeah, different. I mean, that's a little bit of a different scale for sure. But I thought it was important to talk about, because disproportionate reactions a lot of the time cause us to do really stupid things, like Will Smith, and slapping the guy, assaulting the guy on live TV in the middle of this award show. He had zero control over his actions. You could tell based on the rage in the when they cut to him after the slap, you could see the rage, and he had zero control over this reaction that he had. And so these reactions can cause us to do stupid shit like that, practically ruin your career by assaulting somebody, or make really terrible choices with food, for our bodies, and all kinds of stupid, terrible things, right?
Yeah, because in the moment when you have that disproportionate reaction, even going to any food example that we've just shared there, you do feel out of control. You do feel like you can't stop, because the thoughts that are going through your mind are racing so fast. You don't pause, you don't give yourself that space, you just eat and eat and eat, and you're justifying it in your head every moment that you're doing it.
100%. And it's just an emotional, it's like that emotional trigger. You've been triggered by something, and then it's just like that runaway horse, that we were talking about, of the conditioning, where it just takes over, it completely takes over. You don't have control anymore. And you end up making choices that you wouldn't otherwise have made if not for that trigger. Right?
No.
Yeah. So sorry.
I was just going to say, we were speaking actually before, and it's kind of similar. I was sat making a cup of tea, and I was really stressed and really anxious about Monday, and I saw a bag of marshmallows in the cupboard where the tea bags were, and I thought, I'm super stressed, I'm super anxious, I'm going to have a marshmallow. And I had the marshmallow. The only difference, which is still a little bit disproportionate, I'm worried about something that's happened on Monday, so I'm going to have a marshmallow. Go figure. But it is, a habit that I sometimes fall back into. And I had this marshmallow, and I thought, oh, well, I didn't feel any better after having that marshmallow. And that's the thing with these disproportionate reactions. You don't feel any better after you behave in that way,
You usually actually feel worse, because then you're full of regret over the fact, because that you responded in this way that was disproportionate to the thing that actually happened, and you regret your choices because you weren't making conscious choices. You weren't being present with what was actually happening, and you weren't responding in a way that would make the situation better. You were reacting in a way that typically makes the situation worse, right?
Absolutely. And I had that marshmallow, and then I popped the bag back in the cupboard and thought, well, that didn't help. But once upon a time, my disproportionate reaction would have been, I'm going to throw away absolutely all the sugar in the house, all of the carbs, all of the bad foods. I'm going to throw them all away. Again, disproportionate reaction.
Yeah, to eating a marshmallow.
I feel like it's like a chain of events, isn't it?
100%. It is absolutely a chain of events. Yeah. That leaves us full of regret and bad choices. So you talked about the way that having that marshmallow would have turned out before versus how it turned out today. So that brings me to, it sort of segues nicely into, can you share some of the things that you've learned through this process about what can help with these disproportionate reactions that we have, or what helped you in that moment to not fall back into the way that you would have handled that marshmallow before, and to end up having a different, more productive outcome this time?
Yeah, absolutely. It is just a case of taking a breath, pausing, creating that space, and questioning your thought. What am I thinking right now? Why do I want this? So for me, before it was, I knew, I was aware that I was stressed, I was anxious. And at one point, the food of the bad food, the comfort food, would have been my first port of call to comfort me, to make me feel better.
Yeah.
So I did that this time. I took the marshmallow, I ate it. But the difference was, somewhere in there of eating that, I paused, and I was asking myself, how's this making me feel? Do I even like the taste of it? Really quick time you're asking these questions. And then I had it, and I said, oh, well, that didn't make me feel any better, because I created that pause. Whereas before, I would have just been marshmallow, 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 packet gone. Oh, now I feel really bad, really guilty, I feel sick, I don't like myself. So not only am I anxious, am I stressed, I'm telling myself I'm a bad person, I'm a horrible person, work on Monday is going to be horrendous, the world is imploding, and then you go and think, well, I may as well carry on now, I may as well eat everything else I can get my hands on, because I feel worthless. And it sounds extreme, but that is how you feel.
Yep. 100%.
And but this time I had one, I didn't want it. There's no need to feel guilty, there's no need to feel bad about it, because I had a marshmallow. There's no rules around this marshmallow. I tried
not anymore, there's not.
No, not anymore. Believe me, there was a lot of rules around marshmallows. And all food, actually.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on bananas. They've got rules as well. But this time it was just a marshmallow.
Yeah.
And I'm not on a plan where I can't have anything.
Yeah.
It didn't give me what I wanted, which was comfort. But that pause that created that space for me to
Yeah.
make that decision of put the marshmallows back for another day when you do want them,
Yeah.
stopped me from going into that binge. And
Mm.
instead, I took my tea, I sat down, I took some deep breaths, and this time I just distracted myself. I picked up a book, I read my book, distraction, done. It was my anxiety wasn't on a huge scale. It was a small decision. So I was able to distract myself from that thought.
Nice. Yeah, it really is about just starting with that pause, right? Because again, anytime there's a disproportionate reaction, as like I said, there's a reason for it. There's something causing it. So it's about creating just a pause for a second between that trigger that triggers the reaction and the response to the reaction. So we just need to create a space between the two where we can just breathe. Bring our attention back into the moment, back into our bodies, get a little bit curious about, okay, what just triggered me? What just created this need to react in me, right? And then what could I do differently about it? Instead of react, how could I respond in a way that's kinder, that's more compassionate, that's more intentional, right? Instead of just reacting from this place of stress or rage or pain or whatever else, we can pause and we can connect with what's actually going on, what was actually triggered, and then just kind of go, okay, so what do I actually need? What is this trigger telling me that I actually need? And in your case this morning, it was obviously the comfort. And so you can find other ways to manage that need instead of just lashing out and responding or eating all the things or just whatever. So yeah, understanding the fact that we have disproportionate reactions in the first place, right? Because I didn't know what any of that was. For me, I just thought I'm angry all the time and I binge all the time.
The anger.
So understanding that, okay, this way that I'm about to react is disproportionate to the situation, right? Eating a bag of marshmallows because I'm stressed, a little bit disproportionate to the situation. Now, again, it's perfectly normal to emotionally eat sometimes, happens to all of us, but the extent at which with which we do it is where we can get into trouble, right? So one marshmallow maybe to calm nerves isn't that big a deal, but if it ends up being like an entire bag of marshmallows and then hating yourself and binging on chocolate the whole rest of the day, disproportionate reaction.
And do you know, it sounds silly, but when I'm unsure on the food, whether maybe I think it's going to make me feel better, when I feel like I want to emotionally eat, sometimes I have a bite, I have some, and I say, do you feel any better? Is this making me feel better? Like that marshmallow today. Do I feel better? And the answer was no. Had the answer been, well, actually, yeah, I did. I just want a little bit of comfort and I'm getting it from this, then that's fine. Because after I finish, I'm not going to be telling myself that I'm a bad person and the guilt and the shame, because I've already said I feel better. I've accepted the fact that this is making me feel better.
And if
the answer is no, I don't feel better, then no, you're not making a good choice for you.
And if you're making a choice from the perspective of considering, is this choice making me feel better? And then deciding whether or not you're going to carry on based on the answer to that, then absolutely. You're going to have the marshmallow or the chocolate or whatever it is, and you're going to feel better. And then you're going to stop eating the thing. You're not going to keep eating the thing to the point that you feel sick, which would then be the disproportionate reaction, right?
Absolutely.
So that's exactly the point too, like really connecting with, is this something that I need to help me feel better? And if it is, then great. I want to feel better. So I'll have a little bit of the thing until it comforts me and I feel better. And then I'll just go away from the incident feeling better, which is wonderful. But if we're not connected to that, is it making me actually feel better? Then we just keep eating all of the thing. And, we end up feeling sick and then, everything that comes with that.
It's just that pause, right? It's that pause in between each bite. Is this making me feel emotionally or
Yep.
physically good
Yep.
or better, then carry on. If not, then stop.
Yeah. What's causing me to want it right now?
Yeah.
Is there a way that I could fill that need
Yeah.
that would make me feel better than reaching for the food? If
Yeah.
not, then maybe reaching for the food will help me feel better. And then if that's the case, I'm probably going to feel better pretty quickly, and I don't need to eat so much of it that I'm sick.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Sana, that is literally everything we've just said is in Sana, right?
Oh, yeah. Great point. So Saner, Saner that Hollie's talking about is the tool that we use in E-CET to help dig into why we eat or why we're about to eat something. So it's just an acronym that stands for S stands for stop. So just stop before you're about to do the thing or eat the thing. Or even while you're eating, like Hollie just did it after she had the first marshmallow, she did it, which is fine, do it during or even a little bit after you've eaten, whatever, but just stop and ask yourself, what's going on with me? How do I feel? Am I physically hungry? What's going on? Notice, N is for notice. What was I just thinking about? What am I feeling right now? Right? We can connect with our bodies, and pausing to connect with our bodies in this way is another thing that can really help with those disproportionate reactions, because anytime we go straight into that disproportionate reaction, it's usually because we've been triggered by something. And it's usually whenever we're triggered by something, we usually end up getting completely disconnected from our bodies. When we're activated in that way, when we're triggered in that way, we're disconnected from ourselves and our bodies, and we're just in reaction mode. So if we can just pause and notice what's going on, and reconnect with our bodies in the present moment, and kind of turn that decision-making part of our brain back on, so that we can, respond instead of react. We can respond then intentionally instead of reacting emotionally. So N is just notice, those things. And then E is extend yourself kindness and compassion. Because if you are about to react, if you have been triggered by something that's difficult, then you need that kindness and compassion, right? To help you kind of move your way through it, instead of judging yourself for the fact that you've just been triggered. Just kindness and compassion to yourself that's how you're feeling. Right. And this morning, I feel like that's what you did with the marshmallow. You recognized you were feeling stressed, right? Yeah. Gave yourself some kindness. Yeah. And then R, of course, being respond. Instead of react, respond with loving kindness, with trust, and with compassion, and with intention.
Yeah.
With intention. What choice is the best choice for me to make next? And as you know, it's a process that takes practice. Yes. Felt a little awkward.
Tons of practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't too comfy and easy the first few times you tried it, I'm sure.
No.
Yeah.
But it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. It comes more naturally now.
Yeah, absolutely. And less disproportionate reaction in all situations, not just relating about food, because you can apply that to anything, any thought, any situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure you can. Yeah. If Will Smith had applied it,
Yes.
he may have recognized, wow, I've just really been triggered. I should breathe and extend myself some compassion.
Yeah. And maybe in his case, had some marshmallows.
And maybe had some marshmallows. Yeah, he should have some marshmallows in his pocket, and then maybe he won't slap people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's too funny. Too good. Too good. Well, I think we covered everything that we wanted to talk about today. We talked about what they are, how they can impact us to do things like slap people or even impact the way that we eat and the choices that we make for our bodies. And I think we hopefully shared some strategies that can kind of help a little bit if people want to practice working on their own disproportionate reactions, or even just noticing, because a lot of the time the first step is just noticing that they're happening and being aware of the fact that this is what's happening. Because we very much live in a culture that is nothing but disproportionate reactions, I feel like, at this stage.
Agreed.
Especially on social media, everybody's just always reacting to all the things. So yeah, you have to first notice that that's what's happening.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then start practicing some of the things. So hopefully we helped bring a little attention to that, and maybe helped give some people some things to think about, and some practices to work on. Anything you want to add to any of that, Holly?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it all. Yeah, it's been a good chat, Ronnie.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I hope to have you back again soon.
Thank you.